the Chicago Bulls franchise just ranked in the top 20 most profitable sports franchises in the entirety of the world and the sixth most profitable NBA franchise. So the question I want to talk about here is that if Bryson Graham builds a real contender, is he going to actually force ownership to put their money where their mouth is? And what they've always said is, we pay for a contender. Is it time for them to actually show that? We're going to talk about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And I want to talk about it this. We've all seen the reactions of the Chicago Bulls being the sixth most profitable NBA franchise, and we've talked about this for years. The Bulls always come in as one of the most profitable franchises, but they never spin like it. And the question that I have here is, and the angle that I want to attack this on, is that what does Bryson Graham need to do to put pressure on ownership to actually put their money where their mouth is finally, right? We don't need reckless spending, and that's what some Bulls fans do want to see. And I say some because I do think it's a smaller kind of portion of the community that doesn't really understand spending, and you have those fans that are just like, oh, you should just spend into the tax. That shows that you want to win. Well, we see now more teams than ever, right, don't spend into the luxury tax and still are winning teams. You had, I think it was 22 teams did not pay the luxury tax last year. So it's the majority of teams are now not paying the luxury tax. So it's not about that you need to pay the luxury tax to win, right? I think now it's been proven you need to draft smart, and you need to be smart with your assets and your money and keep your flexibility, and you could build a contender without going into the luxury tax. Now, with that said, though, to keep a contender together, you do probably have to spend at least to the first tax. Now, the second tax apron is something that most teams are going to try to avoid, but we've seen an overcorrection to that where teams don't even want to spend into the first tax apron anymore. More and more teams are staying below the luxury tax. So with that said, now, it's not about spending recklessly, and some Bulls fans just want to see that. But it is about when you build smart, and then when you need to get over the top, that next step, is the ownership going to be willing to do that? You have to set a foundation first, and then you have to go to that. When it said, like we know that Arturas a couple of years ago said, "Oh, I'm willing to go to ownership," and it was stupid, right? It's Arturas, right? The thing is that the Bulls are not a small market franchise, and I think that we have to stop eventually acting like a franchise that's begging for survival. Now, I would say over the last couple of years, we weren't a team that was worth paying the luxury tax for. The question, the thought is that you've got to build a team that's worth it, right? Because we're one of the most valuable, one of the most profitable, and we're always going to be that. And, I think the last couple of years have shown and proven that. Like, the Bulls have not been a winning team, yet we still maintain in the top, right? So I think when you look at this is we are not one of those rebuilding teams that are rebuilding without a revenue base. We have a revenue base, a consistent one, based off a lot of nostalgia. There is a segment of Bulls fans that because of that Jordan era, they're always going to be Bulls fans. And that is worldwide. And so because of that, you're always going to be a profitable team, right? That's why, you do get Bulls fans, they react the way that they do, right? We're too old for the it's too expensive argument. It can't fly forever. It can't fly forever, ever, right? And so this is a team that's asking for championship level support once we earn it. And how do we get there, right? I want to be clear here, and let's separate some things. The luxury tax is different than the second tax apron. The second tax apron is where you're going to see a lot of teams don't want to spend, right? And I do think fans need to be able to separate that. Paying the tax, it means that ownership writes a bigger check. You're not spending into the second tax apron. Also, I do need Bulls fans to understand that we are always over the cap. There are some fans that think that the cap and the luxury tax are the same thing. No, there's a space between the cap and the luxury tax. The Bulls are always over the salary cap, but we never spend over the luxury tax. We've done that once in our history, right? And so going deep into the second tax apron, that's what affects trades. That affects exceptions. That takes away your roster flexibility. So you want to spend smart. It's not about loud spending. It's about smart spending. And so with Bryson Graham already being careful now, I don't think that that's the same thing as a cheap ownership, which people kind of lump it all in together, right? You spend smart first, and that's what the Bulls did this offseason. And then you spend big when the basketball return justifies it, which means that once you are this consistent winning team, that's what you're going to do. So let's talk about the things that could trigger this ownership group to actually spend big money on this team. Keep in mind, we did spend the luxury tax one time while the Derrick Rose era, but Derrick Rose couldn't stay healthy, and then they immediately went back under the tax. But they did show a willingness to do that then. Hopefully we can see it again now. So the first trigger, Caleb Wilson becomes a star. If Caleb Wilson becomes a true star in the NBA, a true star, not just a player that's just like somebody on the other day was like, yeah, there are stars. No, we don't need to have our stars. We need to have players that are truly stars in the NBA. A franchise level player that shows and proves that they can push you forward. And if Caleb Wilson does that while on his rookie contract, I'm not saying, keep in mind, this conversation isn't talking about now. It's not talking about even next offseason. Now, we could be talking about 3 years down the road. But if while Caleb Wilson is on this rookie scale deal, that he proves to be a star, so years 2 or 3, he makes that leap, that you have to spend and use that window to spend. Now, you spend smartly again. You overlap the contracts when his extensions do. But if he proves himself to be a franchise-level player, that has to be one of the first triggers to show that this team probably needs to start thinking about spending, right? Don't wait until Caleb Wilson is already making superstar-level money to then spend and get aggressive. And that is up to Bryson Graham. And then if he becomes the guy, that clock starts ticking immediately on how expensive that roster is going to be, because once you have that, it's there, right? The cheap part of the Caleb Wilson's career is when you need to be the most aggressive once he proves it, or your base of your foundation proves that they can at least be a playoff team. If in the next 2 years the Bulls are a playoff team, keep in mind that would overlap with, that'll be the end of Modest's rookie scale contract, halfway through Caleb Wilson's rookie scale contract. That be super and uber aggressive in that time period. You'd have another couple of years of Josh Giddey on this $25 million contract, and then you may have to reconstruct some things after that, right? Trigger number 2, Modest also either becomes a star or proves himself to be the elite running mate next to Caleb Wilson that you need. If Caleb Wilson is your number 1, if he turns into your number 1, and I'm saying if just because we haven't seen it yet, no disrespect to anybody. If he becomes your number 1 and Modest and Giddey become co-number 2s, your number 2, your number 3, and you have that, and like I said, it all overlaps while they're on reasonable contracts, there's no reason not to be aggressive. If Modest Buzelis develops into this 20, 22 point per game scorer on high volume, a playoff caliber scorer, you have a creator in that as well. If that happens, that's when you need to be aggressive. This is why the 2026-27 season does matter so much in the evaluation portion of it, because through that, it's there. A modest leap could decide how expensive the next move the Bulls have to make in the following offseason has to be. If Modest becomes a real number 2, or I even say this, a real high-level number 3, right, that you feel confident he can be the number 3 on a really winning team, that's when you have to, it's no longer you're funding an experiment. You are trying to build around proven value, and that's what you have to do. Trigger number 3, Josh Giddey proves that this core can work. That's what Josh Giddey's responsibility is. And I know people like Josh Giddey's probably still going to have a big scoring load, this season. But as you improve the team, Giddey will be the first to tell you his scoring load's probably going to go down. His facilitating is going up. If you build the team correctly and Josh Giddey fits into that build, you're talking about a player that probably is going to be leading the league in assists for the next 3, 4, 5 years, possibly to do that, right? And so if Josh Giddey really works with Caleb Wilson and Modest Buzelis, and then they have their organizer, and that is a playoff level base and foundation, then it lets Bryson Graham spins around a core rather than have to spin to build the core. And that is a very big distinction in how you have to build a team if you get to that. If Josh Giddey does not work, then the Bulls may need to spend on an expensive lead creator. And I say if because of the possibilities. Again, not to disrespect anybody or trigger our Josh Giddey stance. But I do think that Giddey's going to have to prove that his shooting is consistent, and that then we're going to have to prove we have enough defense around Josh Giddey to where the fit matters, and it's something that you can build with. A Josh Giddey success story here in Chicago, it changes the shopping list quite considerably if that happens. If Josh Giddey is the long-term point guard, which many hope that he is, then Bryson Graham could go buy weapons instead of buying his replacement, and that is a key in also building this team. Trigger number 4, and this is one of the most important triggers that can happen in this, is you have to win a playoff series with your foundation. If you win with this, I'm not saying this year's version of the team It may be next year's version of the team. But if you win a playoff series while Caleb Wilson is on a rookie scale deal, that puts pressure on ownership to build correctly. Again, this is about pressure on ownership, not necessarily Bryson Graham. Making the play-in is not enough to justify spending. It's just not, right? But winning a playoff series, when you have a young core on a rebuilding team, a first or second year coach in Tiago Splitter, and especially if the East stays this deep, that's what you get to. If the Bulls win 46 games over the next 2 or 3 seasons, right, and Caleb becomes an all-star, Modest is average over 20, Josh Giddey leads the league in assists, and the Bulls, let's say they lose in round 2 because it needs another big-time scorer or a big-time center, that's when Bryson Graham should immediately be to ownership. We're about to spend some money. Buckle down. Let's go. How much can I spend? What's the thing here? Because at that point, your young core is no longer a theory. They are proven, and the real competitive window has opened up then. The real competitive window. Not the Arturas Karnisovas competitive window, the real competitive window. And that's what it leads to. If the Bulls win a playoff series, they clearly need one more high-level piece to get them over the top to be able to go further. You better be willing to spend it. Otherwise, all of us need to be looking at ownership, riding, pickforks, all those type of things. Trigger number 5, a difference maker becomes available. And this is the part that you don't control, right? But this is the thing that you can set yourself up with. This is why I talk about the flexibility that like Bryson Graham has set this team up with. Because here's the thing, right? If for some reason a player becomes available that you didn't expect and that you have the assets to go out there and get that player, you may have what that other team is looking for. Sometimes the star that you need, they come through trades, unexpected trades, and not necessarily free agency. That's what the Bulls also have to be ready and prepared for. Not to go out and desperately be searching for one, not to be thirsty for one, but if one becomes available and you are a second-tier team in the Eastern Conference and maybe you didn't expect that player, you need to strike when that's hot if there's a fit for it. You don't need to just be chasing a star to be star chasing, but if there's a roster fit for a player that becomes available, I'll say this. I'm just throwing this name out here. Again, I don't expect him to become available. But let's say Devin Booker becomes available. Let's just say Devin Booker does. And Devin Booker's like, I want to go to a team with a young core, some defense, and a point guard. And that ends up being the Chicago Bulls. You better be ready because that is the type of player that could potentially put you over the top. Is he going to take shots away? Yeah, but at that point, it may be exactly what you need, right? So again, and I just threw that player out there because it was just the first one that came to my mind when I'm sitting here talking to y'all. So, that's a possibility. You have to be willing to take on salary when the move truly changes your ceiling, but do not do it before then. Don't do it for a move that looks like it's going to change your ceiling, doesn't really pay off. That's not what we're here to do. But if Bryson Graham looks at somebody and says, getting this guy, adding him to what we have, puts us in the conference finals, the answer can't be, can you find somebody cheaper? And if that's the answer by ownership, I would not be mad at Bryson Graham saying, listen, I tried here. I wanted to make it work in Chicago, but these fools don't want to spend money. They ain't really about no business. I'm getting the hell up out of here. I could never blame Bryson Graham if that ends up being the case. But that's another trigger that could happen and get there. And then also I think about this. Spending also has to be about, at times, keeping your own players. If we live in a world, and I would love to live in this world, I'm not saying it's going to happen, that Modest hits on his potential. Caleb hits on his potential. Josh Giddey continues to develop. God forbid, Dalen Swain hits on his potential. Noah Essengate hits on his potential. Sometimes then at that point, your spending is about keeping your own guys, and then you find those guys that can support it that are on reasonable contracts. And that's another part in this. When we talk about spending, it also has to be, are you willing to spend to keep a roster together if we do it? If Bryson Graham hits on this thing that he's trying to do, if we develop these guys turn into real NBA players, these guys look like players and a roster that can actually go someplace, you got to be willing to spend that in that. Keeping a player that you developed is sometimes more worth it than going out and finding a replacement that even if they're a little bit cheaper because you know exactly what they are, you know how the chemistry works together, you have that. So if Dalen Swain becomes an excellent wing that can score, that can defend, those things, you spend to keep him. If Leonard Miller becomes a great sixth man, which could happen as soon as this season, do you pay to keep him? If Rob Dillingham ever becomes something, do you pay to keep him, right? Those are things. Retaining players and the right players becomes a part of contention as well when you develop those things. So that's what you hope to get to. Championship spending isn't always about the glamorous spending, but it's about spending the right way, right? And then all this, I think, as well, is development makes spending smarter. if you are able to develop your own internal guys, it makes everything easier. Development is the ultimate financial strategy for any NBA team. When I just talked about it, if all these guys hit, right? If Modest, Swain, Caleb Wilson, Dillingham, Essengay, like I'm just throwing all the young guys out there, if they become, useful, if they become more than that, and you have to be aggressive about keeping those guys around. Internal development reduces the need to overpay for basic rotation duties. So even if those players turn into rotation level players, it's easier to retain your own rotation level players than spending. Because let's say you have a rotation player that's a high level rotation player on a team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals. That may be a lot more expensive than keeping your own guy that does the same thing on your team because they hit the open market. That's how it comes about building around stars. You keep the players that you do that, and it's there. It shouldn't be develop or spend. It needs to be develop and spend in the right ways, but development has to be the focus thing. And then when you look at the ownership part of this, right? I think that when you look at the ownership, of course, the modern CBA, it punishes overspending and reckless spending. That's not what you want to be either, right? And you can't spend like a contender on a 40-win team. You can't do that, right? So you have to be that. It's about the competitiveness and the return to that, and we'll see what happens in that regard, right? I do think this. If the rebuild works and ownership still refuses to spend, that is where you're in the nightmare territory. If Caleb Wilson turns into a 25-point all-star, Josh Giddey and if Modest Buzelis turns into an over 20-point-per-game scorer, Josh Giddey consistently is giving you 15, 10, and 10, something like that, right? Let's say Swain develops into a starting caliber wing, and the Bulls win 49 games over the next 4 years and lose in round 2 because they need to spend on another shot creator, and an all-star becomes available. Bryson Graham has his picks, he has a salary, he has a player, and then the ownership refuses to pay to get that done. That is the nightmare scenario for Bryson Graham. That is the nightmare scenario for the Bulls, and we'll see. There are 3 stages of spending, and I think that you have to look at. One, right now, it's protecting flexibility. That's where the Bulls are right now. That's where Bryson Graham has showed. That's not a bad place to be in. The stage number 2 is the emergence of your young players and stars, hopefully. That's where you start really investing in them. And then the third stage, the final stage of that, is the contention window. That's when you take the brakes off and you spend, again, not recklessly, but you spend considerably to keep that championship window open. Hopefully we can get to that third stage. Hell, we got to get to stage number 2. But hopefully eventually we can get to that third stage where it's a real conversation to be there. And we'll see what's going to happen in regards to that. The other thing that I want to talk about on today's episode is that Mark Stein reported over the weekend that the Chicago Bulls, among the Pelicans and some other teams, remain engaged in Ben Mathurin possibility in talks, right? And we've talked about this. You guys know I'm not down on Ben Mathurin. I think as a bench scorer, you can do a lot worse. It comes down to what the contract is. But the question I want to have to this, and I got to give you guys a lot of credit. There have been a number of guys who've mentioned this in the comment section. Then rather than spend assets on a sign and trade right now. Now, if it is Isaac Okoro in 2 seconds, throw this conversation, throw it away. But if you have to spend real assets to get in Ben Mathurin in here, in the building, right? Is it not better to just give Swain and Jalen Sellers a real audition this year? I know that a lot of people are down on Swain after the Summer League. I know that. We've talked about it. I'm not going to belabor that point. We all know what it is, right? But Swain was not drafted just to stand in the corner. That's not what he was drafted to do. At Texas, he had the ball in his hands. He attacked, he created, he scored, he defended, right? And so now, while Summer League was really rough for him, I don't think that that's something that should define him. Give him development possessions. Well, let him earn development possessions, because I'm not for giving anybody anything, right? Let him attempt to be the scorer on the second unit, right? Let him attack mismatches. Let him go after rebounds. Let him push the break, right? Don't try to turn Swain into a stand in the corner 3-and-D player before you really get to test the rest of his toolbox. And I think that you drafted him. Give him a chance to earn that, because the last thing that you want to do, and I get it, Norman Powell may not be here for long term, and that's perfectly fine. He may only be here the year, he may only be here the 2 years on his contract. But, rather than bring in somebody to fill that role, try to give him a chance and see, let him sink or swim. Let him sink or swim and see what he's going to do. But then also there's the Jalen Sellers part of this. Now, Jalen Sellers is a guy that had a very strong showing in Summer League, right? He was kind of the antithesis to what you saw Swain being. He was a strong scoring guard, right? He brought shooting to it. He also stepped up the defense as the Summer League period went on, right? And that, he doesn't need to become Ben Mathurin, so to say, but if he can become an 8 to 12 point rotation guard for you, and you got that as an undrafted free agent, that says a lot, right? I think that he'll have to show value out there, and there's a chance of that. But when you look at what he shot at, and the fact that he shot, 40%, I think, from three or something like that, like, that's somebody that you want to look at that does have the ability. And the reason why I'm more on Jalen Sellers and some people are like enamored with Donovan Atwell is that Jalen Sellers has the possibility to do more. Donovan Atwell is a run off the screen, catch and shoot shooter, don't dribble a lot. He's not going to defend a lot. I don't care if people are going to say, well, he said that he wants to play defense. I care about what I see. That motherfucker don't play no defense. But, Jalen Sellers is somebody that gives it. And, yeah, there was that first Summer League game, put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because it did seem like he went into selfish mode and did those type of things. But I do think that is something that you can look at and say, maybe let's take a look and see what we have in this guy. We brought him in because we believe in something in him. To bring him in on the first day after the draft and bring him in as an undrafted free agent. So you have that there, right? Jalen Sellers doesn't have to become a star to become valuable for this team and to add some bench scoring, some bench shooting, and some depth. If he becomes a cheap shooter who can score in bursts, defend a little bit, right, and play within your things, that is value there. There's real value there, right? And then, of course, you can try to talk about adding Rob Dillingham to the conversation. But then again, I'm talking more about off-ball guards. Rob Dillingham is an on-ball guard. And, one of those ones you kind of got to look at it that. I just wonder if, while, yes, Ben Mathurin has been a 15 to 17 point per game scorer, but he hasn't really been defense. He hasn't been plus defensively. If either Jalen Sellers or Dalen Swain could turn into a 10 to 12 point, but actually giving defense, that may be net better than Ben Mathurin, right? And again, this is not to knock Ben Mathurin. 24 years old, somebody that can average 17 points per game. He's only 24. He would definitely fit within the timeline and all that type of stuff that you're looking at. Like, I'm not mad. I'm not saying, hey, let's ride if they do make a move for Ben Mathurin. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that maybe the counterpoint to all of this, rather than chase somebody else, is to develop your own. And that's kind of what we're talking about with this team, and being one of the focuses of this team is internal development. And you have two guys in here that may be worth that development. And that's all I'm saying, right? The price alone is worth the conversation. Some people can say that the price of also, though, Ben Mathurin is worth the conversation of bringing in somebody that you've already seen be able to be a bench scorer on a winning team. And there you have to go. 2026-27 is about gaining information and evaluation. And some of that comes through looking at your guys now. And then if Dalen and Jalen don't work out, like, hell, even if you don't feel confident by the trade deadline, but if you definitely don't feel confident in them by the end of the season, then you could be a little bit more aggressive about going out there and getting that next score that you need. I know some people are all like, I saw some comments like, we need to get a score now to help Caleb Wilson and win Rookie of the Year. Like, it's all like, everything isn't going to be done in one offseason. And sometimes the patience play is actually what works out the best for you in the long term. I know a lot of Bulls fans' patience is wearing thin. That AK wore that on them. But maybe, just maybe, that's the right play here. But we'll see. But that's it. That's going to do it for today's episode, y'all. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, man. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at Bull Central Pod on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.